Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to join the Free Iran Global Summit. President-elect Madam Rajavi, can I thank you for the leadership, hope and vision you continue to provide for the Iranian people during these dark, ugly years of the regime. Yours is a vision of hope and light against multiple crimes and dirty tricks designed to tarnish the opposition and deny the truth. Too often, we've listened to these deceits. They've led us to deny you the support you deserve. They've led to the banning of the PMOI, which was eventually corrected in the legitimate courts of the US, EU and UK, where justice can prevail. They led to claims that respect and support for opposition could allow Iran to descend into the carnage that is Syria today. But what is present-day Iran? A place where those in charge execute innocent people at will, where protesters disappear in the night, where basic rights are denied, where money that could be used for food and vaccines is diverted to weapons for terrorist groups fighting proxy wars, a place obsessed with adding to the nuclear threat the world already faces. That's what the clerical regime expects the West to protect. We should have listened to the opposition years ago instead of practicing appeasement. We might have avoided giving so much in return for so little over nuclear weapons. We might have shown more compassion and given more assistance to the people of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty. We have a second chance. We've seen the farce of the latest presidential election in Iran. We've witnessed the treachery over the nuclear deal. Now is the time to stand square with the democratic aspirations of the Iranian people. Now is the time to back you, Madam Rajavi. Now is the time for the British people to put things right and show our support for you and your 10-point plan for a free and democratic Iran. Iran will be free. Thank you.
Madam Rajavi, honourable colleagues, people of Iran, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be with you today, at least virtually, and an honour to join parliamentarians and Iranians from all around the world for this international gathering to support the people of Iran and their resistance movement, which calls for justice and a free Iran. In September 2016, my colleagues and I tabled a parliamentary motion with regards to the massacre of 30,000 political prisoners, which were held in Iran's prisons in the summer of 1988, including women and children and all political prisoners who supported the opposition movement of the PMOI. This motion was one of the most supported parliamentary motions during the 2016-2017 session, which urged the United Kingdom government to recognise and condemn this brutal massacre as a crime against humanity and asked the United Nations to order an investigation and bring the perpetrators to justice. Similarly, in July 2018, my colleagues and I tabled another parliamentary motion condemning the attempted bombing of the gathering of the Iranian opposition in Paris for a free Iran, the alternative. I was one of those representatives at the conference, and indeed, had the terrorist plot succeeded, I and many other colleagues in the UK Parliament and parliamentarians from across the world would have been killed. Even worse, we now know, of course, that terrorist attempt was made by an Iranian diplomat using the diplomatic pouches to pass the bomb to terrorists who would then go from Belgium into France to Paris to place that bomb underneath the conference. Now, the motion that we put down was supported by a large number of my colleagues in the British Parliament. And the strong support for our two parliamentary motions reflects the strong and cross-party support the NCRI enjoys, and indeed the President-elect, Madam Rajavi, enjoys in the UK Parliament and amongst your friends in the United Kingdom. Our two parliamentary motions show that there is strong support for bringing the mass murderers to justice, including the sham election of the President of Iran, who of course was responsible for the 1988 massacre. And I would like to make this pledge that as 35 of our colleagues in the Commons and Lords, including many of my colleagues who are present today, made the history and destroyed the unjust terror tag against the PMOI, which was a great victory, not only for the Iranian resistance and for you, Mrs. Rajavi, but for the people of Iran. We are going to take the mass murderer, Ibrahim Raisi, to the court. We call on the United Nations Security Council to refer him to the International Criminal Court and try him as a criminal against humanity. And this as a must. As you always say, Mrs. Rajavi, we can and we must. Let us call for a free Iran. Iran will be free.
Thank you. President-elect Madam Rajavi, honourable colleagues, people of Iran, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to speak at the Free Iran gathering this year. It is an honour to be with you, to stand in solidarity with the people of Iran in their struggle for a free and democratic Iran. Today we have a large delegation of some 40 British parliamentarians and over 100 prominent figures from the UK. Madam Rajavi, this great Free Iran summit and the huge support this resistant movement has inside and outside of Iran, with over 1,000 parliamentarians and political dignitaries from all 5 continents throughout the world, clearly shows the vast support that you have. But there has been a lie which the Iranian regime has tried to spread, that this movement does not have any widespread support. But my colleagues and I have participated in many great conferences by the NCRI, with over 100,000 people attending, which is just a microcosm of the support of the movement inside of Iran. We are also aware of the nationwide activities of your movement throughout Iran, and we know how much the mullahs are frightened of this increasing support for the resistance. Today, we have seen the selection of a known perpetrator of gross human rights violations, Ibrahim Raisi, as the next president in Iran. Meanwhile, the regime continues to enrich uranium to 65% without any credible civilian use and refuses to cooperate with either the IAEA or the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iran. In February, a regime diplomat was sentenced to 20 years in prison for terrorism charges and for plotting to bomb the NCRI gathering in Paris in 2018. As Blkman said, an event at which I and many colleagues were all present. Now, the time has come for the UK and its allies to correct that mistake. And the first step ought to be to support that call publicly and officially for the justice we're highlighting at this conference today. Some of my own constituents here in Hendon, in London, are former political prisoners who survived the 1988 massacre in Iran and have spent several of their family members also part of the victims. I understand that they have now lodged a complaint against Raisi for his role in the 1988 massacre with the Metropolitan Police in the UK. I support that, and I stand with my constituents in their efforts to seek justice for these atrocities, those that they suffered at the hands of the regime. Any honest observer today can see that the Iranian people want a different Iran, an Iran free from the religious dictatorship. This outcry from freedom is summarized by Madam Rajavi in her 10-point plan, and that will guarantee Iranian people to establish a free and democratic Iran. The international community must now recognize and support this democratic option. We must stand with the people of Iran as they take the destiny of their country into their own hands. Thank you.
Dear Mrs. Rajavi, dear friends of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Free Iran World Summit. As we all know, these are difficult times for Iranians. The pandemic has wreaked havoc, and the sham presidential election, which was loudly boycotted by the Iranian people, proves once more that the regime cannot be trusted. Even after rigging and inflating the votes, the regime could not claim a voter turnout higher than 48%. It is clear that boycott was a huge political blow to Khamenei and his regime. Nonetheless, Iran is entering a new era with Raisi as president. As you know, he has been involved in human rights violations for the past 4 decades. There is no indication why a Raisi government would not continue to perpetrate such violations within a culture of reigning impunity. The international community must respond adequately and hold Raisi to account for his past and future actions. Raisi's rise to power is a direct consequence of the international community's appeasement towards Iran. It is another proof that, much like we have seen over the past 40 years, this regime is incapable of reforms. The moderate versus hardliner paradigm that many in the West have believed in is debunked. In fact, the Iranian people's protest chant on the street has lately been, reformer, hardliner, the game is now over. This is why we need a new policy towards the regime. Experience has shown us that the fundamentalist regime in Iran cannot be trusted. This regime has lied about its nuclear program for the past 20 years, so we cannot isolate this one issue with all the other issues of the regime. It would be wrong to assume that once the JCPOA is in place, the international community can address the regime's other threats. The right policy should not just focus on the regime's nuclear weapons program, but also its ballistic missile program, its sponsoring of terrorism, its regional malign influence, and its human rights violations. All these elements should be part of a coherent and comprehensive policy towards the regime. A core part of this strategy, however, must be our clear and public display of solidarity with the Iranian people. The European Union and the international community should stand with the people of Iran in their quest for freedom. The world should demand from the Iranian regime to free all political prisoners and to stop torture and ill treatment. Human rights should be our top priority, and we should make our relations and negotiations with the regime contingent on its absolute respect for human rights. We stand in solidarity with the people of Iran as they demand respect for their fundamental human rights and freedoms. We stand in solidarity with the people of Iran so they can choose their leaders freely and democratically. Popular protests during these last years have shown that the Iranian people demonstrated their desire for fundamental change. They desire free and fair elections, freedom of speech, gender equality, and no discrimination against religious minorities or different ethnicities. All of you, the National Council of Resistance of Iran and Mrs. Mariam Rajavi are working towards this goal and deserve our support. It is now up to us, the international community, to hear these voices and to put them front and center in our strategy towards the regime. thank you all, and I wish you a successful summit.
از بس که توی کنج قفس موندیم پرواز یادمون رفت، پرواز یادمون رفت. از بس که سرودی به حقیقت نسرودی، آواز یادمون رفت، آواز یادمون رفت. از بس که توی خاطره ها رفتیم و گشتیم، امروز یادمون رفت، فردا یادمون رفت. از بس که توی دخمه تاریک نشستیم، خورشید یادمون رفت، خورشید یادمون رفت. یاران 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 یاران، باید که از این دخمه تاریک به درآییم، باید که از این کنج قفس پر بگشاییم. برخیز بستیز با خست درآویز، از مرگ نپرهیز، بشکن قفس تو، بشکن و بازریز. یاران 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 یاران، باید که از این دخمه تاریک درآییم، باید که از این کنج قفس پر بگشاییم. برخیز تا خانه به منزل گه خورشید گزینی، بر کنگره عرش نشینی، گلهای امید از چمن مه بچینیم، گلهای امید از چمن مه بچینیم، از چمن مهر بچینیم. یاران 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 باید که از این دخمه تاریک بدراییم، باید که از این کنج قفس پر بگشاییم. برخیز بستیز با خست درآویز، از مرگ نپرهیز، بشکن قفس و بشکن و بگریز.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Mrs. Rajavi, and address all the people of Iran who are following this Free Iran World Summit 2021, the democratic alternative on the march to victory. We are gathering in a time when someone under the most serious accusations of crimes against humanity has been installed as the next president in Iran. It is an appalling evidence that Ibrahim Raisi based his career on promoting, encouraging, and ordering the massive killing of 30,000 political prisoners. Even Ayatollah Hossein al-Mutasari objected to these killings, and in a secret recording released in 2016, he is heard calling on Raisi and the fellow executioners. In my view, the biggest atrocity in the Islamic Republic, for which the history will condemn us, has been committed at your hands, and in future your name will go down in history as criminals. End of the quote. But Raisi publicly defended these killings as one of the proud achievements of the system. We, as a group of MPs, stated in a letter right after Raisi was announced that European leaders and the European Union are faced with this hard reality. We cannot have business as usual. We cannot close our eyes to human rights violations and repression of women. We cannot ignore the Iranian regime of terrorism that has taken 85 million Iranian hostage. In this precise moment, we have to show our commitment to democracy and human rights and our support for the Iranian people decide to free elections in a free and democratic Iran. Last February, a Belgian court sentenced the regime's terrorist diplomat Asadullah al-Sadi to 20 years in prison. 3 of his accomplices were also sentenced to between 15 and 18 years in prison for plotting a terrorist attack against the National Council of Resistance of Iran in its rally in Vilpin. Threats of terrorism and abduction by the clerical regime double down on the need for a firm policy vis-à-vis the Tehran regime. We have in Europe a sanctions mechanism, the Magnitsky Act. It's a very important tool to hold human rights violators responsible for the crimes, such as Ibrahim Raisi, and any human rights violator in Iran accountable. We can push to put an end to impunity and use all that it is our power to do this from the European Parliament. Dear Mrs. Rajavi, I would like to tell you once again that you can be sure of our support, that we thank you for letting us join you in this noble journey and to be by your side along with the people of Iran. And let me add that your 10-point plan is our shared vision for a free Iran in the near future. Thank you.
Madame Marianne Rajavi, congratulations for having Iran Free World Summit, discussing most important issues for people of Iran as well as global community. You have to know that we follow events in Iran, and all the crimes committed by Mullah's regime are really known to us. So we're not going to give up our fight for free and democratic future of Iran. So that's why I congratulate you and your team on continuous activities in order to present all the information as well as facts around developments in Iran. The recent so-called elections in Iran really didn't surprise us. Mullah's regime does everything in order to keep system in place. It's against people's will. It's against brighter future of Iran. That's why we are not going to silence ourselves in raising all the responsibilities behind the elected president, new elected president of Iran, and his involvement in crimes against humanity. Those crimes cannot be forgotten. And we will do everything in order to support future of Iran's people based on their will and democratic development. Thank you.
In qualità di membro del Parlamento europeo e della Commissione Affari Esteri, porto la mia voce a sostegno del popolo iraniano, in particolare alle donne iraniane, che sono sottoposte alle peggiori repressioni e disuguaglianze da più di 4 decenni di regime sanguinario e oscurantista che governa l'Iran. L'inaccettabile discriminazione basata sul genere persiste nella legge, nella pratica e negli atteggiamenti, privando le donne e le ragazze della dignità e della possibilità di partecipare e contribuire alla società. Nonostante questo riescono a svolgere un ruolo fondamentale nel boicottare il regime, come ad esempio le coraggiose donne iraniane e le madri dei manifestanti uccisi nel novembre del 2019. Ma il timore è che queste sofferenze potranno solo che peggiorare dopo la nomina di Ibrahim Raisi, che ci consegnerà un regime ancora più brutale, crudele e sanguinario in Iran. Raisi, soprannominato il macellaio, è conosciuto per essere il criminale della strage del 1988 e infatti è il primo presidente in assoluto ad entrare in carica già sanzionato per crimini contro l'umanità. Il regime iraniano degli ayatollah è alla sua radice un chiaro nemico della pace e della stabilità regionale. Ha una filosofia radicale applicata alle relazioni interne ed esterne. Mi chiedo pertanto, come deputata e come cittadina europea, come possono l'alto rappresentante e i capi di Stato delle democrazie europee riconoscere la presidenza di Raisi? Come possono riconoscere una qualunque leadership politica a chi ha ordinato le condanne da cui non è uscita viva una sola donna? Come possono dialogare con i rappresentanti del governo iraniano guidato da un uomo responsabile di decine di migliaia di morti? E, special modo, cosa resta di parlare con un simile regime e i suoi rappresentanti? Come Unione Europea dobbiamo essere risoluti e senza paure nelle varie negoziazioni o chiusure. Ritengo che l'impegno di un parlamentare europeo debba essere rivolto alla solidarietà con il popolo e la resistenza iraniana per la libertà e la democrazia. È necessario porre fine all'impunità del regime e sanzionare Raisi per gravi violazioni dei diritti umani e crimini contro l'umanità. perché garantirgli un maggior benessere e risorse nei prossimi anni significherebbe vederlo impiegato per esportare diverse forme di violenza e di terrorismo. Vorrei rassicurare la signora Rajavi, leader della resistenza iraniana, e tutte le madri i cui figli sono stati loro ingiustamente portati via troppo presto, che io sono con voi e potete contare sul mio sostegno e impegno per la vostra richiesta di un Iran libero e democratico.
Verehrte Frau Präsidentin Rajavi, meine lieben iranischen Freunde und liebe Bewohner von Aschraf 3. Ich bin sehr froh, an dieser großartigen Veranstaltung teilzunehmen. Ihre Stimmen werden den Regierenden der Welt ein starkes Signal senden, nämlich die Ermahnung, den Kampf um die Freiheit und die Demokratie im Iran endlich noch ernster zu nehmen. Die sogenannte Wahl des neuen iranischen Präsidenten Ebrahim Raisi, die in Wahrheit das Ergebnis eines massiven Wahlboykotts ist, hat vielen von denen, die jahrelang auch in Europa an das Märchen glaubten, das Regime könne durch sogenannte moderate Kräfte reformiert werden, endlich die Augen geöffnet. Wenn das Regime sich in seiner Macht bedroht sieht, wird es alles Mögliche unternehmen, um diese Macht auch zu sichern. Die größte Gefahr für den Fortbestand der klerikalen Diktatur im Iran sind ein aufbegehrendes Volk und ein organisierter Widerstand. Die Tatsachen bezeugen, dass das Mullah-Regime nicht reformierbar ist. Und die angeblich Moderaten wie Rouhani haben der Machtergreifung durch die brutalsten Flügel des Mullahs, nämlich Raisi und seiner Clique, den Weg geebnet. Während wir als Europäer jahrelang vergeblich nach den moderaten Mullahs im Iran suchten, Gespräche aufnehmen wollten und zurückhielten, begingen wir zugleich zwei große Fehler. Zum einen setzten wir unsere Hoffnung auf eine Illusion, die niemals Wahrheit wurde. Zum anderen haben wir die demokratische Alternative zu diesem Regime, nämlich den Nationalen Widerstandsrat Iran, immer wieder ausgegrenzt. Dabei war es der Nationale Widerstandsrat, der gangbare Lösungen vorschlug. Wir aber haben in den zurückliegenden Jahren diese Alternative weitgehend ignoriert und damit den brutalen Mullahs im Iran einen Dienst geleistet. Das sollten wir selbstkritisch zur Kenntnis nehmen. Wir müssen unsere Iran-Politik überdenken. Der landesweite Boykott der Präsidentschaftswahl im Iran hat einerseits sehr deutlich ans Tageslicht gebracht, dass das Regime das Vertrauen des Volkes gänzlich verloren hat. Und andererseits hat es gezeigt, dass der Widerstand im Volk Rückhalt genießt und von ihm unterstützt wird. Wir wissen jetzt genau, dass die Widerstandsgruppen der Volksmudschahedin im Inneren des Landes die Kampagne des Wahlboykotts in der Gesellschaft federführend vorbereitet haben. Das iranische Volk bedarf jetzt mehr denn je unserer Unterstützung. Wir müssen den Menschen das Signal senden, dass wir mit Wort und Tat sie unterstützen und die Zeit der Beschwichtigung des Regimes vorbei ist. Damit den Politikern und Bürgern im Westen diese Botschaft in den Zeiten der Pandemie, in denen sie so viele andere Probleme zu bewältigen hatten, nicht verloren geht. Wir müssen heute ein lautes und machtvolles Signal in die Welt setzen. Eben dies geschieht in dieser Konferenz. Und ich bin sehr froh, dass ich auf diese Weise dabei sein kann. Möge der Iran bald zur Freiheit gelangen. Das wünsche ich aus ganzem Herzen Ihnen, mir, allen, die auf der Welt Menschenrechte und Frieden unterstützen. Vielen Dank.